live on Google, me and you.
Oh, awesome.
We're
Okay, that was weird.
really delayed.
Yeah, there's a big delay there, isn't there?
On Google, me and you.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, I think we're good now.
We caught up?
Yeah, I turned off the other one. I think we should be fine.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, tell me about this thing you were doing with Chris Birch from Modiphius.
Right. Oh, we were talking about perhaps just brainstorming about the rules for Mutant Year Zero and how so many people have fallen in love with the game, about going further and making new games using the same or similar rules.
Okay, let me stop you there. So what was great about the rule system? Tell me that first.
Well, Mutant Year Zero's rule system is greatly simplified compared to a lot of games out today. Uses a D6 success system. Roll a 6 out of a group of 6-sided die. You succeed. And the more 6s you roll, the more things you can add to your success. Like you could do more damage, or you could knock someone down. When you're trying to convince somebody of something, you might be able to convince a larger group. Or
so you got all these additional things, modular kind of additions to your success. What if you don't roll any successes? Is that just a fail?
In combats, in the combat, it's just a simple failure. But if you're doing other skills, pretty much any failure is going to be a critical.
Reprogramming an AI, but I got to fail.
You get a fail, then either the AI is going to take over your brain, and something horrible is going to happen. Anytime you fail when you're trying to do something, especially that significant and possibly game-changing. In the rule book for Mutant Year Zero, it actually says anytime you fail a skill roll, there are consequences. So,
but it's not like the way it might be in typical games, which is I attempt to program the AI to be my dead ex-wife, and they're like, "You failed," and I'm like, "Okay, I will try again tomorrow." It's not like that.
No, absolutely not. It would be a case of you may successfully make the AI, but you're going to suffer for it, or you blow up your lab. It could be. It depends on the DM. Depends on the situation.
Of my ex-wife, or I create the worst possible version of my ex-wife, and she begins to she manages to get my contact book, and she starts talking to all my friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It could be, yeah. There's so many things that happen, and of course, it's up to the GM and the situation, and the characters. I mean, it's a little free flowing. There's a lot of player interaction. Players get to choose a lot of things that they normally wouldn't. In some games, it's left up to a roll. Also, the DM it really just kind of guides them. They really emphasize less DM involvement in a lot of cases, and let the players tell the story for themselves.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? What does that represent about where role-playing games are going? It introduces a big kind of question about, is it the DM controlling this story as it always has been, or is it something else?
Well, I think some DMs and in a lot of cases some games emphasize DM control, and if the DM is controlling too much, it's inflexible. It's not a true-to-life story anymore. It's not as interactive as it could be. And the whole point of role-playing games is interactive storytelling. And if you don't have that interaction from the characters, allowing the characters to help you tell the story, it's really one-sided. It's not really a role-playing game anymore. It's dice rolling and a guy telling a story. So
yeah, I found that a lot when go ahead, please.
Well, so I mean, the system, I didn't know anything about it until last year at the con, in Indianapolis.
Gen-Con.
Right, and I picked up the book because of the artwork. It was phenomenal, and it won some awards. It was awesome. And I took it home, and I showed it to a couple of my friends, and they were like, we have to play this. This looks awesome. And it turns out it was. It was absolutely phenomenal. They loved it. I loved it. It was easy to run. You could do it off the cuff.
Talk about that, because that, for me, and I think a lot of dungeon masters, you know, they have other obligations. Talk about what made it easy to run off the cuff.
Okay. The simplified rules. You can fit all of the rules in your head. You don't have to have your rule reference there once you get used to them all the time. You don't have to look up, oh, wait a minute, what is that rule? What is that rule? What page is that on? What section is that in? They're very simplified. There's a limited number of skills, 4 stats, you're rolling D6s. You might have an equipment bonus. It's really so simplified, but yeah, and fair. I mean, it doesn't simplify things to the point of it not being, there being no point to rolling. I mean, it's still an important part of the game. But distances, ranges, all the little details that make combat and rolling for skills, why you would have to roll to begin with, give it a chance of failure or success, is easy to maintain. It's easy to come up with enemies. Like, I didn't realize we were playing one day, and everybody wanted to play. So I go over, nothing prepared, absolutely nothing.
That's the thing I find myself in that situation a lot.
Yeah, it happens, especially now that we're older and we do have a lot of obligations. It was nothing to it. In fact, I started doing that all the time. I had nothing planned before I walked into that room.
Tell the story of what happened in that particular game session.
That particular game session, in Mutant Year Zero, there are a lot of random things that you have to roll for at the beginning of the game, like bad things that could possibly happen in your little town, which is called an arc. Like, I rolled somebody died. Randomly rolled who it was. It was their leader. And it turned into, with the help of the players, after 2 rolls, a conspiracy by a certain group in their town to hide a truth from everybody else. And the leader they found, like, stashed away, murdered, even though he was about to die anyway. They call it the culprits. It turned into this huge game-changing event that they really wrote themselves.
Well, it sounds like it changed the game, but since you had no idea what was going to happen.
Exactly. None of us did. And the way the rules are written, it allows you to do things like that and still maintain a reasonable game. It doesn't get out of hand. It was a really awesome time. Everybody was so excited, and people were really anxious to play the next game to see what else was going to happen, because nobody knew.
So how does that affect? Because I know when I play a lot of games, I really like published adventures. If the writer is good, if there's a good plot there, if it's something I couldn't come up with myself, I'm really excited to run those. But then, of course, you have like the issue of, like, I don't want to railroad players and all that. So how would it work if you had a published adventure and you were using that system?
They do. They do have published adventures, and they're written for these things exist. These people are here. These resources are there. Put them where you want on your map. And when your people get there, or you can lead your people there, they run into these things. But even the encounters there, they're so flexible. For instance, one of the published, I don't know, can we talk about published adventures and like the outcomes? Because it's sort of a...
Yeah, no spoilers though.
Yeah, it would be a spoiler. Yeah. Well, the first supplement, the Lair of the Saurians. There's several published adventures in there, and they give you things that are going on in the world, things that exist, and your players can turn into whatever they want. Really, I mean, well, I can't do it without spoiling. I can't talk about those without spoiling anything.
No, that's fine. Well, I guess another question I have is that if you, well, no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, what were you saying?
Well, I would say that, so what if you were taking, as I often do, an adventure from another similar setting that wasn't designed around that system? That said, there's been a murder, and, you know, the clues on the scene lead to 1, 2, 3 possible leads that they have to follow down. And then there's, you know, there's a shadowy organization. And then there's a question about whether their sponsor is, you know, is right or wrong. You know, what about something like that? If I had a game like that, how could I run that?
You could totally pull out the important parts. You know, the general feel is, I guess, that would be the main thing, and the actions that have taken, especially before your characters show up, before the PCs show up. All of those things happen without them being present anyway. And of course, the personalities of those who they interact with. Those are going to be something that you can pull out.
Would I be taking this published adventure and kind of putting it into a solution and dissolving a little bit so that I can view it as the same way I would view an adventure that's published for the system, saying, okay, well, here I've got my antagonists, and there's 3 of them, and I've got, you know, my clues and this and that. And is that how I would sort of?
Yeah.
Would I not run it in the linear fashion that I might normally run it?
No. The way it's written, linear. I don't know. Linear can lead to boredom, I have found. Generally speaking, especially with more sophisticated gamers. People have been doing it a long time. People that expect more from the game. I mean, we have all sorts of entertainment these days, and role-playing games have to keep up, you know. And when you try to run something in a linear fashion, people know whether they know what's going to happen next or not. They know something is going to happen, and they just have to sit there and go along for the ride.
I can give you a great example of this. I'm running probably the world's greatest published adventure ever, Horror on the Orient Express for Cthulhu. Dude, it's amazing. Basically, your job is you're collecting all these pieces of an artifact, and when you get the artifact together, you're supposed to take it to where it's bound, so you can destroy it. So as soon as they pick up, I mean, so before they collect the first artifact, you kind of are in this, like, you know, open area where all these things are happening. They don't really know which way to go. As soon as you get the first artifact, and particularly as soon as you get the second one, then I found I had to pause the game. I had to play a couple other games. I had to run a couple other games for this group because I was like, now it's almost like a job because they've got, like, you know, let's say it's a car. They've got the right front tire. They've got the right rear tire. They've got the chassis, and they know they got to get the rest of the shit. So how do you keep that interesting?
That is a wonderful question.
It felt like a job after. I was like, you guys don't feel like it's a job, but I feel like I'm making you do a job.
Yes. And a lot of the PCs will expect the DM to hand them the rest of it.
Right. Yeah. And we're like, okay, we're just on for the ride. You're just gonna, okay, now we're in a new city, so now we're gonna get the left rear tire. So let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were doing the ride, but I did feel maybe there's some more we could be doing with the great art of role playing than this.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to fall into that rut too. I mean, it's happened to me.
Take it from there. Oh, it happened to you where? Tell me the
I mean, it's happened to me running several games in the past. I mean, you were a part of the Elric game I was running back in, I guess, the early 90s. Yeah, we totally fell in a rut with that. And it didn't go anywhere after that. It just kind of fizzled out. And that's what, that happens sometimes with games anyway.
Shouldn't, because it is the, it's a fun thing, so it shouldn't really happen.
Yeah.
So how do you use a system like the one you're describing in a situation like that, or can you? Do you have to reframe it?
See, you kind of have to, like, I didn't have that problem with this game at all, because the players found whatever clues were there and ran off in whatever direction they wanted to go. Damn the clue. And because of the way the rules work, it's very easy to do that. It's easy to let them do that. And if they go outside of your idea of what you expect them to do, it's okay. It's not a stressful thing, because it's very easy to run off the fly when you have. It takes you 2 seconds to come up with a dozen new adversaries.
But if I'm running something like horror on your Express, how do I do it using that system? I don't want to know it all, because I have all this. So many of these writers, some who are not with us anymore, God rest their souls, put in a ton of work. So how do you keep it going using that system? How do you preserve the good parts and get rid of the bad ones? Get rid of the railroady feeling while preserving all of the great set pieces and the great the meta story and all of the subplots and things like that.
I'm not exactly sure that particular system would lend well to horror on the Orient Express, because it's not a sandbox. It is stuck. I mean,
it's the original railroading adventure. I mean,
yeah, you can't get off the train. Well, I mean, I guess you could, but then the adventure would be over. See, it's really, I don't know if you could run a game like Horror on the Orient Express.
I think you could. I mean, I'm going to say that you could, because even you not using that system, earlier tonight we had a game, and you guys went someplace. You went to a city that I was not expecting you to go to. I knew you were thinking about it last time, and last time I said, that's not where the story is. But then in the intervening week, I was like, well, there are things they could learn there, so I should let them go there. So what I did is I bought another source book that has that city, so that I had a lot of things to draw upon while running that.
Right.
So, I think something like Horror on the Orient Express, the great thing about it is that until you collect all of the pieces, you're not really ready to go to Istanbul. So all the other things you do, that's why we could screw around in London for basically a month before the game even really started. So I don't think that a railroady adventure has to be railroady, I guess. But
yeah,
I guess if we're asking, when you do have a storyline that you think players will really enjoy following, because they start here and they build and they build and they build, and they get more confidence in plot, and then they finally hit this great, kind of like climax and denouement. Like, how would you use that system when you want to tell a story? How about that?
Well, yeah, that's definitely. There is an overarching theme in Mutant Year Zero. I mean, there is the meta plot. I mean, there's even a chapter called the meta plot, which is what the characters are headed toward. They're searching for a place that they call Eden. They don't know what it is, and part of the game is finding out what it is and why their great leader told them that this was important. That was the point. I mean, it was something that you were guiding the PCs to. But by the time they found any solid evidence that the place existed, they had ceased to believe that it was a thing. So at the point of realization, at that point that you were talking about, the climax, it was a real shock to them. Like, the players sat there with wide open eyes going, I mean, we've been playing this for months.
Like, they discovered it was real, or what?
Yeah, they were like, that's really a thing? I thought that was a red herring. You know, they had.
I guess, you know, and I think that's the point. The red herrings, for example, if you're doing a linear campaign like Horror on the Orient Express with a system like this, I think it's like when you play a video game. You play Baldur's Gate, and you know that you have this, you know, main Pillars of Eternity. You have the main story, and you know that if you go see Wonica or whatever, they're going to advance the plot, and then you're going to be in the next chapter. So you may as well mess around and do as many little side quests as you can. So I guess the thing is that you insert the sandbox. You have your ... and in between the dots you have sandbox. And they may spark other campaigns. For example, you know, some maybe a totally unrelated campaign. And then maybe you'll do that for a few sessions. Or maybe once you do the main campaign, you'll have to go back there and like actually retrace those steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what you're saying is that the benefit of this system is that it lets you run on the fly. The drawback of this is that it's ideally suited to not having a plan. So
well, I mean, having an overarching plan, but not forcing, allowing the players to really bend that plan.
So it changes the job of the GM quite a bit, I think, into being more of like, yeah, I think it changes the GM's job. And like, I'm less the narrator. I'm not the plot driving forward. I need to keep these events in mind because they may. I will fit them into my game when they fit in, when the players want to do it, etc.
Mm-hmm. When it becomes important to them.
Do you find that on balance, that the players are running shit more than the GM is running stuff?
No, I didn't think it was unbalanced at all. It was.
No, I didn't say. I said on balance. Do you find that it's more you running stuff or more them determining what's going to happen next? Because I can definitely see the benefit of that.
They really determined what was happening next, and I felt that it was really the perfect blend of player interaction and DM control. And I hadn't really thought too much about that until I had picked up that book and read it. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's try this. Let's see how this works. And it works unbelievably well, especially with seasoned gamers.
Cool.
I think it might be fun to try something like that with Horror on the Orient Express. Something a little looser.
It would be the ultimate test of that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, it really would. Yeah. Now, I guess the next step really is moving that system into different genres. Being able to morph the system to fit into more than just Mutant Year Zero, because it's a very specific rule system as it stands. The guys in somewhere in Scandinavia who wrote the game have designed the entire rule system specifically for Mutant Year Zero. So it has to be bent and broken and put back together to fit other genres. Which I don't think would be too difficult, honestly. I've been thinking about it and testing a few things. I think we could come up with something that would be solid, that maybe sci-fi, futuristic sci-fi folks would enjoy, and maybe even do something more fantasy.
I was going to ask that. Like, what if you were doing this a fantasy situation? How would you do that?
I think that would actually be harder than a space sci-fi kind of adventure. But I think that except for the, your community having its own statistics and you having some control over how your community grows, I'm not exactly sure how that would work in to a fantasy setting, but I believe the general idea of the players guiding the GM and telling the story themselves, coming up with the ideas themselves, would easily fit. I think it would be a good change of pace. I think a lot of times we get too caught up in the rules and forget about the story. And something a little more loose and less strict would allow the story to come through stronger.
I totally think from what you're saying is totally true. But what I think is like really cool about the system is that this idea that in that game, it makes it a point to say you're not just your character, you are part of a community, and your community is like a player. They did a little bit of this with the Pendragon game, which was also by, I think, Chaosium or one of the related companies. And like, I think it's actually one of the problems that GMs make all the freaking time, which is that you make a character, and some of your friends are your alpha gamers, and they're definitely gonna they come to you with a great concept, and it's easy to fit it in. And then you have a couple other, like it might be your newbies, it might be your girlfriend or something like that. In my horror experience, what I found is I had one person who had never played role-playing games before, and she created a character, and she didn't understand where the campaign was going to go. So she made a character that would have been great in London, but wasn't that great on a train game. And then my girlfriend made one, and she made one that she thought would be cool for the game setting, and it was, but it just didn't seem to work out for this particular setting. And what it was is that the alpha gamers had kind of eclipsed the beta gamers in the sense of, this is my character. I'm going to make sure that my character is very tied into your GM story, and I know a lot about games. I'm basically a pro. I'm going to make sure that I'm there at the bleeding edge of this plot line as it advances. Mm-hmm. And some of the people who weren't as good at that, they created people who they thought were cool, and then those people didn't get used. And I think if when we were doing character generation as GMs, we took maybe a bit more time, and not just Mutant Year Zero, but I think science fiction or fantasy, any game, and I gotta say it's something that I just probably don't do because I'm lazy. When you're making a character for someone, it seems to me like it would be a good idea to follow this line of, I'm not just a character, but I'm part of a community, or I'm part of a cohesive whole. I'm part of something else, so that you can make sure that every character comes along with hooks that keep them relevant through the entire game. Because nothing is worse than watching the other person for 3 sessions get all the limelight, and you're like, come on, man, my antiquarian is like super dope. Like, how come I'm not getting any limelight? And it's, I think it does come back to when you were first making the character, maybe not enough work was put into what are your overall goals. Do you have goals within your initial setting, and then the setting of the campaign, and maybe even the setting of the world beyond the campaign? Right. I think it's a failure on my part. Well, I like the way Mutant Year Zero has come up with something saying, you're not just you. I utilize this today without even knowing about Mutant Year Zero. A new character joined a game that you were part of, and he's coming in the middle, and he's like, okay, I'm a Russian badass Spetsnaz guy. I'm like, okay, I get it. Arms dealer. I'm like, yeah, cool. Everybody can get that. It's a trope from the films. And I forced him to have a kid. I didn't force him to have a kid. I said, who else is part of your life? You're 45 years old. You're not 27. You have to have a life. What's your life? He goes, I have a wife and a kid. I was like, great. You live in Miami. Where do they live? He goes, maybe Cuba. I'm like, nah. You're rich. You have a Cuban wife. You have a kid. Your Cuban wife is going to insist upon you that kid is growing up in Miami to attend the better schools, to have the better opportunities. It's 1997. Cuba is not such a great place to be. Right. She's going to insist upon that. So now this is great, because when this guy screws up, I have leverage on him. He's got a kid. I know he's a Russian arms dealer. Somebody knows where his wife and his kids live. Right. I can bring that into the game whenever I want. Absolutely. And I should have done that with the antiquarian and the Horror on the Orient Express. I should have done that with the lady who runs the Chinese tea shop. And I think it's something that we have to do. So I think one of the greatest benefits of this, what you're telling me about Mutant Year Zero, is like, make them an intricate part of the world. Make it something that you can get game seeds from. Yeah. Make it something so really, as the GM, you really don't have to do anything. You can just hit shit like dun, 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 and the plots. Every character's motivation will drive themselves. Tell me what you think about what I said. Yeah,
You're absolutely right in every way. And there's actually places on the character sheet for you to write your relationship with different people in your community. Like, you got to name somebody that you owe something to. You got to name somebody that you care about. You got to name somebody that you hate. And those characters become part of the story. They, you know, at the beginning, they just threw a name down. But that came into play. It had to, you know?
Well, see, lots of games have that, though. Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition has, if you do the entire character creation process, like, who's your most important significant person? Blah, blah, blah. At least I think a lot of people just kind of, like, don't bother doing that.
But simplified. It's simplified to the point
where
it's not drudgery. You should look at the character sheet. I mean, like the character sheet in the book.
Well, you know, how do they do that though? Is it because I can imagine a way that would be really cool. You roll up your character, and then you're like, okay, now let's roll up your background. Oh, you were born in this random tables. They're kind of cool.
No, not random tables. The player has to choose these.
Oh, okay. So like you're from the slums or you're rich, or like you're from here or you're there, or like you're religious or you're not. And then after you do that, your community, and let the player have some input into the game world then and go, so what kind of community would you be in? And you'd be like, oh, well, you know what? Since my character likes to play the guitar, I want to be in a community of Rastas. And you're like, huh, well, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, we can figure that in. So it's like, community's going to be like, we're going to be all the musical people, and our religion is going to be like, you know, everybody should love each other and blah, blah. I'm like, huh, that's interesting, because then if you meet a new group of people and they could be potential adversaries, you have to carry that with you. And it gives me ideas for plot seeds.
Yeah.
It makes our job easier, I guess.
You bring up religion there, a funny little quip from our game. They randomly had come across a bunch of comic books, rolled randomly, and in Mutant Year Zero, comic books and magazines and stuff like that are called artifacts. They're artifacts of the ancient people, and they took these comic books back, and it started a religion. They didn't know it wasn't real. They didn't know it was fiction. They had no idea. And these semi-literate people that had no clue were reading these comic books, and they were mostly Spider-Man. So they had the Church of the Spider-Man. The leader dressed up like Spider-Man, and his prayer, of course, was the song. You know, he really believed the higher being was Stan Lee. And it really came to fruition when an accident happened, and the leader of the Spider-Man cult actually got an arachnid mutation. They really thought he was the chosen one. It was actually one of those side things that really added to the whole story. It was enjoyable for everybody.
So what do you want to do with this system?
I would love to alter it enough to allow it to maybe ultimately, I would like to see it to be genre agnostic. I would love to see a form of this be able to apply to any story you want to tell. I don't know how easy that's going to be. Maybe
I don't think it'd be that hard. Have you tried Numenera at all? You should try it. This Numenera, The Strange, and all those games.
Yeah, I got one of the Numenera book actually, and great. I have the cipher.
Yeah, you can play the game in 5 minutes by watching the video with Monty Cook and his girlfriends, and then you have it. You own it, and you have it inside of you. The game, the rules, like you said, you can keep them in your head. And this is where role playing is going now. You know? Yeah. It's like we went through D&D and we thought, okay, well, you know, it's great, it's awesome. But then we have to do 3.5. We have to do, 3. We have to do 3.5. We have to do Pathfinder. We have to have rules to adjudicate every single thing. And I think where we're going now is we're like, okay, yeah, we get that. And now we're saying maybe we don't want it to be so simulationist. We want it to be where we can just freestyle.
freestyle. That's where it's at.
Yeah. This is how I DJ. I just scratched 2 records. Replaceable.
Right. Yeah. There was.
I paid $100 on Discogs for each of these, and look what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's not the tone up.
That was the White Album, the original one.
It was the original, yeah. And then
Oh my God. Yeah. So, yeah, you've played the 2D20 system, right?
I have. No, I have not.
Oh, you haven't, but you've read over the rules.
I have talked about the D20, the 2D20 system, and the things I like about it: one, non-binary resolution mechanics. So it's not just you passed, you failed. It's like something else happened. And then I like the idea of the players get momentum as they have successes, and as they have failures, the GM gets heat, or I think they call it doom in Conan. I like this idea. And then talk about that for a bit, because I have a question about that later, which will be cool to get into.
Okay, well, I haven't had much experience with the 2D system. I looked over it, but I didn't read it in depth enough. But it looks like it would be an excellent agnostic system that could also be bent toward a more freeform game, a more player-centric game. But I haven't had a whole lot of experience with it, so I was just wondering your take.
On what?
Do you think that might be a better way of doing the player-centric, like community-based? Yeah.
I think 2D20 would be better than Mutant Year Zero.
Year Zero? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, both games come from Modiphius. I talk a lot to Chris Birch. We talked a lot. We've been talking. We met online on RPGNet in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 2016, so that's 10 years. I've never met him in person.
Really?
But we have been talking about rules. Back in 2006, the whole thing I was into was the reason I got talking to Chris was D20 Rules Light. Because D20 was the prevailing system. So in a way, it was the only thing out there. And I really got into all the Rules Light versions. I think I made a couple versions myself. And I wanted to have Rules Light because my problem had always been when I played D&D, honestly, to tell you the truth, I've DM'd D&D, but I still to this day, do not understand the basic Dungeons & Dragons 3.0 resolution mechanic. I do not understand it. It's probably because I kept buying player's guides instead of Dungeon Master's guides. I don't know. But I never intuitively internalized it so that I could just adjudicate. And that's what Numenera does. It's what 2D20 does, and it sounds like it's what the Mutant Year Zero system does. I think I would be cool with any of them, really.
Okay.
I understand basic role-playing, the Call of Cthulhu system, very well, so I can do that. What I want is a system that's going to get out of the way. And I know that a lot of people aren't into that because we still have a lot of people who really enjoyed the simulationist aspect of D&D 3 and really hated 4 and all this blah, blah.
Right.
And I don't really want to get on a sidetrack on that at all. But, for me, it's much more, I want to be able to adjudicate a task, and I want that task resolution to be universal, to be able to cut across any type of task at all with very few modifications.
Right. I totally agree with you.
I guess my answer to you is I think that they're all kind of okay. I also think that the Star Wars, Edge of Empire, and all those other RPGs are fantastic. I think that Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition was great, although the Star Wars ones have refined that and simplified it a bit. But I think, as long as you're running a non-binary system that you can keep in your head that allows you to adjudicate on the fly, I think that's great. Now, that's totally separate from the storytelling on the fly that you're talking about with Mutant Year Zero, but mechanics-wise, I think if you're using any of those systems, they're great.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I like the system to get out of the way. That's the problem I've had with a lot of gaming system over the years, be it Palladium, D&D, Pathfinder, whatever. We get bogged down.
They were all the same.
Rules.
we have to admit that Palladium,
practically,
they had more. There were still attributes plus skills. You know, they were the same kind of thing.
Yeah. It gets overcomplicated sometimes, and you're looking up rules instead of telling a story.
I did that today. I know, with the new sanity rules of Call of Cthulhu. It's like, and how important are rules? It's important. It's important to be fair, but it's also important to maintain the cinematic aspect. And with Modiphius, I know from talking to Chris that all he is concerned about is telling things in a cinematic style, and that may seem like limited, but it's just that he has decided that that is the most fun, and he's a guy who plays games every week. He's decided cinematic is what's fun. You want to let people do amazing things. If you fail, it shouldn't be the death of your character through mechanics. It should be, you failed. Let's make that a plot point. You failed. You got captured. Remember, you watched Doctor Who?
Yeah.
One of the greatest things, and one of the greatest things about Doctor Who as a show is that in almost every Doctor Who story, and I'm talking about the old ones, the new ones I've watched some, the first few seasons, whatever. But one of the tropes of the original Doctor Who is that the Doctor would get captured.
Yes.
Often separated from Sarah or whoever his companion was.
Right.
And in Dungeons and Dragons or something, like, that kind of wouldn't happen. Like, you wouldn't get captured. It's not, you don't.
If you do, it could be the end of the campaign, know.
Either you kill everything or you get captured, and if that case, then you die.
Again, taking away that binary aspect is nothing but an improvement.
Doctor Who, he always viewed getting captured as, finally, I got captured. I'm getting through to like the actual. These are the actual dudes who are running this stuff now. That was the whole thing. You want to get captured, and and some films sort of like do this, but I think we have this sense in Western culture that I've been captured, the game's over, and it's not really the case. That's where you can make the story more interesting. They stripped you. All PCs, all players hate being stripped of their weapons. As the GM, that's when you have the responsibility to say, okay, you're on the starship, they've taken all your guns away. However, there's an interface panel. One of you is a hacker, that's where you have to bring the skills on board. And if you're reading the published adventure and there's not something there for that person, then you have to create it.
Absolutely.
Then you have to create the steward who comes by the prison cells every hour, and what's he like, man? If one of your characters is a high charm, you should be able to charm him.
Yeah.
If she's a girl, if she's a guy, whatever. Like, she can't be a guy, but well, she could be a guy.
Yeah,
you have to create things
sometimes.
I think getting captured is a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think it lends to the story. It's a storytelling. It can add to the plot and add to the emotion of your players. I mean, their PCs are captured. What's going to happen? They don't know. That can be a great cliffhanger. Doing things. I have to agree with Chris. I don't think I would have said this 2 years ago, but I totally agree now that the cinematic storytelling is fun. It really is.
Why you would not have agreed with that 2 years ago? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. I've totally changed my mind on this. Like 2 years ago, if somebody said, I want to jump and slide across the table while shooting my gun, I would be like, okay, you need to roll an acrobatics check. You need to roll your shoot minus this, and then you got to roll another acrobatics check not to get hurt.
Oh my God, Jesse, I'm having so much fun right now.
Exactly.
I game with you when you came to my house, and we had this combat. We were playing the game fine. It was a murder mystery, and then we hit a combat, and then we played the combat for hours, and then you went home, and I didn't see you for 10 years.
Really?
That is not. Yeah, that's not.
Wasn't. Yeah, the combat. Yeah, we got bogged down in.
Yeah, we got bogged down because I'm like, I'm gonna move 3.5 inches to the left. So, then you're flanking. I mean, it's like, yeah, that wasn't great.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not blaming you, but that's what everybody was doing back in 2005.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. I don't do that anymore.
Savage Worlds was one of the big ones that said, you know, screw that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Go ahead and roll your attack.
Now, you want to grab the chandelier, swing across the room, and do all that? Yeah, you know, freaking try it.
That's freaking awesome.
Do you have great acrobatic skills? Do you have, you know, really great weapon skills? Because in that case, it's probably going to be pretty easy for you, and you'll be really happy. If you don't, I'm still, as the GM, really glad that you tried. But then, and this is a very important point, then I have the responsibility on me. Because maybe I didn't get that much sleep last night, but if you try that and you're not good at those things, then I do require a roll. Of course, we require a roll.
The roll is done.
And you're probably going to fail the roll. So then, and this is where the responsibility of GM is more important, then I have to find a way to adjudicate what happens, and not only that, in a way that advances the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that can be really hard. Think about it. You're tired, and your player just came up with this thing, and you're like, not really what I had in mind. So he tries that, and you're like, well, you fly across the room, and you fail everything, so you fall on the floor. Well, that's boring.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, you know, maybe it ends that he gets captured, or maybe it ends that he ends up with like the villain's wife is in his arms. I mean, that's something you could do.
Mm-hmm.
You land there and you land in the lap of the villain's wife. Okay, that's good because you suck at all the things you just tried to do. Oh, you have a high charm. Roll charm.
Right.
You nailed the charm. Now, for one round, she doesn't want to kill you, and she doesn't want anybody else to.
Yeah, those things work very well. I mean, and in a situation where it doesn't really affect the outcome of anything, when people are doing stuff like that, have fun. Tell me what you do.
Oh, but see, that's the point.
Make me laugh.
If you try something stupid, and the GM says you failed, so it doesn't affect the outcome, then you're not doing your job.
Well, yeah, if they fail, you know, it's got to affect the outcome. But, you know, if somebody wants to slide across the table while shooting, they didn't have to. They didn't. It's not going to.
Dude, at least some of those enemies with like the little micro Uzis are gonna laugh.
Yeah, if they fail,
dude, they'll get a penalty die. So then the guy's like, he gets a penalty die. Come on, he's not immune to humor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could. I mean, when somebody comes up with a good idea like that,
that's my point.
It'll fail. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a total failure.
So, as GMs, what I'm saying is that we have this responsibility that anytime the player comes up with a good idea, we don't have to. We only have to give them what they want if they succeed in the dice roll. But if they don't, then we have to give them. We still have to give them something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have to give them drama, and that can be, dude. That can be really hard.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I have, in some cases, in a failure like that in Mutant Year Zero, when they're trying to do something phenomenal and they totally failed. It's like, you failed, but what did you do? Tell me what you did and how you failed. And they come up with it, and they're usually harder on themselves than I am.
At the very least, he skates across the table like a swan, falls against the great big oaken chair, and then is protected by the heavy table.
Right.
He tried something. You got to give him that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at least he's down among the furniture. He's kind of hard to hit.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good to let. I think it's good in certain cases to let the player decide their fate, because most will be like, man, I felt bad. I was up in the air when that happened, so I'm going to get hurt. You know?
I think that the biggest, for me, and maybe this is just me, but I think the biggest thing that I try to avoid as a player, and I don't play that often, but when I do, I try to avoid this. The thing that always sucked was, it's my turn. It's your turn. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, Josh? It's your turn. And you're like, my choices are, I hit him with my sword, or I don't do anything, because that's all I can do. So, I mean, that blows, you know?
Yeah, that's a little one-dimensional when your players are like that.
For years, that's what we did.
Yeah.
Because the games told us we could not. I mean, I remember this particular terrible combat with you running it, and it wasn't your fault. And there were
I was following the rules, man.
If I had been in the frame of mind I am today, I would have said, when you said, Josh, what do you do? I would have said, I scan the room. Do I have time before my action? Like, yeah, sure. I scan the room. You look around the room. Okay, what's in the room? Now, in those days, it would have been like, you're in a 20 by 20 stone room with nothing at all except 2 braziers 20 feet ahead of you, way past the enemy. But
don't forget those alcoves.
I'm carrying a torch. I got my sword there. I got my torch. You know, maybe, okay, to your left, there's a big pile of papers. All right, fine. Set them on fire. Oh, my God, that's our stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we didn't have the imagination as players because we were not given the choice, because we had grown up with D&D first and second and AD&D, and you only could do this. And now everything is blowing wide apart. And I'll tell you, Jesse, that there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable with playing like that. We had a game today that me and you played where you're on a boat and the back of a fishing boat. You know, so there are certain things there. You know, you were attacked by deep ones. Okay, I'm like, all right, there is a what do you call the thing? The big pole.
Yeah, the pointy thing.
The pointy thing.
Yeah.
I knew the name of it when I was running the game. You have the big 10-foot pointy pole. Somebody grabbed that, and that's great. And then that fell in the water. And then they said, and somebody did say, I look around to see if I can find any other improvised weapons. And I'm like, well, there's a bottle of whiskey rolling around the floor. And he says, I grabbed that. Great, you know. And it's like, you have to be. I think the onus now on the GM is that you have to be able to create. You have to be able to conjure, even if you don't know what they're going to do with it. You have to be able to conjure these much more rich environments where there are other things. So that, because otherwise it's all like a video game, like, you know, the typical video game where it's like, shoot, man, I really wish there was some other thing that I could do except shoot the boss 100 times in the eye. You know, it would be really great if I could do something else. The video game creators, the programmers, are working every single day to try to give us more options. And as role players, we don't have any of these limitations. It's our imaginations. There could be anything. On the back of a boat, there could be anything back there.
Yeah. Fire hydrant. What picked up the fire hydrant?
5 of his ex-wife's dresses are lying on the floor. Somebody smart can do something with those.
Yeah. I can't think of anything.
I mentioned ex-wives twice. I can. You can blind it. I pick up the dresses and throw them over the beast's head.
Well, he was, you know, they smelled bad, and I didn't want to touch them.
It has never had this done to it before.
That's true. Yeah. What would you do?
Fabric. It doesn't know what fabric is. It's like, I'm dying. What the hell? You know, my vision is impaired.
Spooky net.
Yeah, interactive environments is our stock and trade. But this is interesting because now we're getting into a whole thing of like, are you a narrative GM or are you a situational GM? And what do you think about that, Jesse?
I think you need a little bit of both to be a good GM. There needs to be some narrative, and you need to be able to change that depending on the situation. If you simply stay with the narrative, if your players change your environment through their actions, you sometimes can get overwhelmed. I've been there, running standard purchased pre-written adventures where I didn't know what to do. Huh?
Let me stop you there. How do you feel about pre-written adventures?
It depends on the adventure. It really does. I have run some really good ones that were really fun, and I have run some that were so single-dimensional I fall asleep just reading them, trying to prepare them. They can be a crutch, though. I mean, like I said, I've been in a situation where I was running a pre-written game, and when the players burned down one of the buildings, I didn't know what to do because it was important in the book. I was completely at a loss. I don't even remember how we resolved that situation, or if we even did.
What was the problem there? How did the issue arise?
They got into a scrap outside the building, and somebody thought it might be a good idea to throw a torch on on like the horse's hay in order to cause a distraction so they could get away instead of fighting the guards, like the module said. And yeah, they got away. I rolled with it enough, but then the building's description was wooden and dry. I mean, those were the descriptions. So we made some rolls, and the building caught on fire. I mean, to keep realism going, you have to allow for things like this happening. And if the description in the module is dry, and then of course as we go through the module, I realized that's where all their clues were, in that building.
So you failed?
I failed utterly. It was a complete and utter catastrophe.
And how could you have done it better?
I suppose I could have used my brain a little more, and used the tools that the pre-written, use the characters, use the places as the backdrop, and let the characters write their own story, guide them in the right directions, make it interesting for them, keep the attention on slightly in the right direction, pushing them gently, allowing them to explore the world around them instead of being like, okay, you have to go here and you find this out. You have to go here and you find this out. Like you were saying earlier, there are multiple places where you can find out the different information in the Call of Cthulhu game we were playing. We could have found it at the library. We could have gone to the town. There's probably a dozen things we didn't even think of where we could have found information. But in certain adventures I've purchased before, it was so linear that my brain, I kind of fell into the linear.
Your brain fell into the linearity. Yeah, I get that. I mean, you guys were playing Resection of Time, which does not have an Innsmouth episode. However, there is a reference to Innsmouth, to deep ones in Belize, and you were like, oh, let's check out Innsmouth. And I'm like, fuck. So that just meant purchasing some stuff about Innsmouth and letting you go there. And I think the point of that is, well, I have 2 points. The first point is, I'll do the second point first. The second point is that, no, I'll do the first one. The first point is, whenever the players want to do something, I think I initially told you, you said, we're going to Innsmouth. And I said, no, it's not worth it. No, don't do that. No, the correct answer is yes, and. Anytime the players ask for something, you have to give it. And, you might not, I just bought the background material, but you don't have to do that. You can make this shit up. You can say, oh, you get there and it sucks, and these are the people you meet. I think, that's the way you have to kind of look at it. Now, one of the great things about Horror on the Orient Express is that they give you an entire book called Personalities on the Train, or People on the Strangers on the Train. And it is simply for this case. It is, if your characters ask about something that you don't know, they ask to talk to someone, and you're like, I don't know who that person is. Trust me, I made up tons of people. And I kept a pad next to behind my DM screen. Anytime they said, well, we go into the bar, what's the name of the bartender? I'm like, Charles Blakely. Oh, okay, that sounds a bit derivative, but fine. And I write it down, and I'm like, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Trust me, they will come back and ask you again. What was that guy's name? I forgot. So you have to be willing to do that. But also, they had this entire book of these are weird people who are in the campaign. None of them are in the plot. It's 120 pages of people that you can use however you want, and it's fantastic because they have all the skills, they have the story, and you can provide this verisimilitude. So the best adventures operate within this kind of like world where they have all this prepared for it, but you don't need that. You can go online, you can find all kinds of, you can just go online and find you can find people's old games. Mm-hmm. You can find lots of sources for additional characters and blah, blah. And if you ever run into anything that you don't know, you can make it up. I love it when the game actually provides all of that extraneous material because what was great about that book is that the players who were playing that game, they would say, yeah, well, we talked to who's next to us at the dinner? And I'm like, Brigadier Thomas Trowbridge, And they thought that I had done tons of research and that I had the entire thing in my head. They thought I was a genius. It was great.
You are a genius, Josh. But
thank you, Jesse. But then they said, this isn't just a normal role-playing game. This guy's a genius. He's got the whole thing, and whoever wrote this campaign is a genius. We're operating within this tremendously literary world where every single thing we possibly could have thought to do has been written out in pages and pages and pages. And they had so much faith in the game and in the universe that it was like I could do no wrong. It was fantastic. I forgot point number one because that was point number two, is that you can create all of the. You have to be ready for them to take a left turn, and you have to be able to find very quickly on the internet or wherever else, or in your imagination, where do they go? But always say yes. You have to always say yes. Why? Because otherwise they feel a bit hemmed in, and then it's boring, and then they don't show up.
And you gotta admit, you took us to Arkham.
Oh no, Arkham was part of the book, but in the mouth. But dude, there's so much. Ooh, never mind. I can't say anymore.
Yeah.
It's a game in progress.
Right. But yeah, that is, you always have to say yes. Let them do. Otherwise, they see the boundary and
see the boundary.
Yeah, and at that point, you can no longer suspend your disbelief.
That's right. That's it. You lost them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, somebody's emailing me about Voyager. Why does Janeway wear that high neck uniform? Weird.
I don't know. It's kind of weird. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
I don't like my neck. I wear one neck. I didn't get it. I've been trying to hide it, but if I go like this, there we go. You can't see it.
The black shirt kind of covers it up. Yeah, it's yeah. But like I said, I think it's more important for the rules to be simple so the story can shine through. I think that's where we went wrong in the 90s, really. We got too involved with rules. And,
because the original were too simple.
Yeah.
The original D&D 1 and 2 were too simple.
Yeah, they were overly simple.
You said, listen, I shot the guy, but I want to know what happens if I shoot him in the arm. I want to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That's great. But now with these more rules light systems, you tell me, I know what damage you did, and I know, so I can, and I know what the effects are. You did more than 50% of his hit points in Call of Cthulhu, 7th edition. This happened tonight while we were playing.
Right.
Somebody used the pointy thing to stab a D1, and he hit half his hit points plus the 1 point of armor that you guys didn't know existed. That D1 then has to make a Constitution roll, or it falls unconscious, and it was in the water, that means it drowns.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Deep ones can drown?
I think if they've just been like run with a pike, they can. A fish can drown if you kick it with a big pointy stick, right?
Through the gills, I guess. Or maybe they have to keep moving for the flow. I don't know. I don't know much about deep one
Maybe it went through the
biology.
gills, but I mean, at that point, you guys didn't even know their body structure, so maybe it went through. I don't know. But that's the thing. It lets me. I look at mechanics-wise. I don't have the hit location. How boring would that have been? 20 minutes later, I've been like, you pierced it through the gills. But no, I'm like, you did half its hit points. It made a constitution check. It failed. It's unconscious. It's in the water. I'm thinking, it ain't playing no more.
Yeah.
Sorry, game over. Collect, do not collect $200. That's it. And that let me do that,
Mm-hmm.
And and again, it's what I said. You have a game system that builds up with each of my fingers being a mathematical formula, and then you have the top-down one that says you figure it out. But a lot of people new to role playing may not like that. I know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see.
Yeah, that's true. I did want to mention though. I did have a newbie player, guy had never played a role-playing game in his life, as part of that Mutant Year Zero campaign. And like you were saying, those newbies, quiet people, sometimes get overshadowed by the alpha gamers. Did not happen. Was not an issue. He understood the rules.
How is that?
He understood the rules within 15 minutes of looking over and building his character. I mean, it's that easy. Didn't have a problem with any rules issues, so he wasn't afraid to speak up and join in the role playing, because the rule system was so simple that he didn't feel like he was going to be an idiot if he said something.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that a lot, especially with my girlfriend and stuff. Like, I don't want to be sexist or anything, but like sometimes girls are like, "Well, you guys are so good at all these rules and blah blah blah." Like, I don't know. So it really does have to be simple. Like, if you want to do something, you have a percentage chance. You have to roll under it. That makes sense, right?
Right.
But I guess what to recapitulate, I guess what we're talking about is when you do character generation, make sure that it's not just the character. Make sure that they create part of the world, every single character, and don't get lazy.
Right.
When it comes to a rule system, we like ones that we can keep in our heads without having to think too hard all the time, without having to essentially death of games reference rule pages, right?
Yeah.
That's
when you turn into a mentat, it's no longer fun.
Right. Yeah. And I think third, like non-binary conflict resolution, task resolution, where every role is significant in advance. And this is the most important thing. You don't just have, I tried to do this. You failed. You have a turn in 3 turns when the other guys go. No. Every dice roll on the part of a player pushes the story forward. I think these are really important things to sort of take away from the conversation. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right, I'm going to stop the podcast.